You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome, fellow patriots. Get ready for an hour of unabashedly pro-American, pro-conservative, and pro-biblical principles. This is the Blake Johnson Program.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome to it. This is the Blake Johnson Program, and you are here at the Lanterns Radio Network, where it is always our goal, every day, to fix the machine and to serve you with conservative, constitutional, biblical principles all the time. That's my goal, and that is the goal of this network. We have a lot to get to today, a lot of stories that have taken place over the weekend and the past week since we last spoke, but I want to spend a few moments talking to you about principles. More specifically, the idea of freedom versus security. Are those things opposed to each other? Do you have to have one or the other? Or can they mutually coexist? And the reason I bring this up is you had the March for Our Lives rally that took place. We talked about it last weekend. From last weekend, we talked about it. And there was a sign. Well, there were a lot of signs, really. But there was one sign in particular that stood out to me. And it's something that I thought was so telling of where we are today. If you look at the Founding Fathers and what they said, particularly their warnings to future generations, those guys were prophets, man. They really were. And it wasn't like they were geniuses or anything, although, I think they were pretty brilliantly minded, but, they understood human nature. They understood the tendency of a sinful people. Our Founding Fathers were good, decent Christian men. And they cared about this country. They cared about natural rights, our Judeo-Christian principles. They wanted those seeped deep into the root of the American Republic. And one of the things that has always stood by me, one of my favorite quotes, and in these days, chilling quotes, from the Founding Fathers, is a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And he's talking about freedom and security. And I want to read to you what he said. I want to read to you his warning. He says, "Those that can give up essential liberty to gain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." In other words, if you take the freedoms that you have, just think of the freedoms that we have in the Bill of Rights: freedom of speech, of the press, freedom of assembly, to petition the government for a redress of grievances, the right to keep and bear arms, the freedom of religion, all of these and more. If you give those up for just a temporary amount of security, for just a little more security, you will lose both of those. But what I saw from that rally was a sign that said, it's something to the effect of, which do you value more, freedom or security? Do you prefer freedom over security? That's what the sign said. And that goes directly with the warnings from the Founding Fathers, from this specific quote. Those who give up their freedoms for temporary security deserve neither freedom nor security and lose both. I've mentioned this quote before. Benjamin Franklin also said, when asked, what kind of a government have you given the people? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Meaning, it's your responsibility. It's the responsibility of future generations to keep it. And if you don't keep it, if you violate these principles, if you give up your freedoms, then you will lose your country. And in this, I was going to say debate, but it's really not much of a debate that the left wants to have with you. They don't want to debate. They want what they want. To eliminate the Second Amendment. A former Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, I believe is his name. He wrote a piece, I believe it was for the New York Times, and it was all about writing out the Second Amendment from the Constitution. To think of that, a former Supreme Court Justice thinks that we should not have the right to keep and bear arms. Mind you, the Second Amendment isn't just about guns, though that is part of it. It's about the freedom of self-defense, the right to defend yourself, to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Meaning, you can't even partly or partially write out some of these freedoms. It shall not be infringed. But that's what we're doing. That's what we are crying out for. I gotta tell you, I've seen some of the comments lately from David Hogg and others, and it just saddens me. I know we've talked about this so many times, but it just feels different to me. It feels different. It feels like we are on the brink, that this is the turning point of us losing our right of self-defense. And it got me looking at history. When you talk about security, what do you mean by security? That's something I've always found fascinating about the left, is they will use these words and these phrases and these terms that just sound good, but they never define what those terms mean. Take Barack Obama, for instance. 5 days before the election in 2008, he said, "We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America." What did he mean by that? Fundamentally transform. If you love America, if you respect the Constitution, the Declaration, the Bill of Rights, if you respect nature's law and nature's God, why would you want to fundamentally transform America? That's not, make it better. That's not, make people more free. Fundamentally transform means to change, completely change, from the very core, the very essence of what makes you, you. So, when we talk about security, what does that mean? What does it mean to be secure? Because I gotta tell you, there are plenty of nations in our world that are quote-unquote secure. But you have to define what that means. Take a look at Iran. That's a secure country. Well, if you are a radical Islamist, if you fall in line with what the Ayatollah says, if you are a Muslim man, you are secure. But if you're a woman, you better not speak out. If you're a Christian, well, you better not make yourself known to anybody out in the public. If you're gay, if you're, just name the category. If you're anything but what they want you to be, well, then you're not secure. But if you are what they want you to be, well, then yes, of course. You have nothing to fear. You take a look at some of the Middle Eastern countries. You take a look at the elite in Venezuela, in Cuba. They're secure. They don't have anything to worry about. So, when I see this word and I hear this word, secure, from the left, I look into what are they really calling for? Well, we know what they're calling for. They want to ban semi-automatic assault weapons, which aren't even a thing. A semi-automatic rifle is a thing, but an assault rifle, that's a made-up term. Assault rifle, what does that mean? The rifle does not assault anybody. It's the person who assaults. Think about this. If you're being charged with a crime in a court of law, and you're charged with assault, who's the one that is charged? Is it the weapon that you used? Say a knife, a gun, a baseball bat, a car? Name it. Is the gun, is the tool put on trial, or is it the person that's put on trial? You charge a person with assault. You do not charge the weapon with assault. The weapon did not do anything. It did not decide to break our laws. So if I take my car and I, go drive out and mow down a bunch of pedestrians, is that an assault car? Assault vehicle? Well, no. I'd be charged with murder, with assault. I would be the guilty one, not the vehicle. So you see, this is simply an emotional tactic. Cameron Kasky. Was it CNN? I think CNN is basically where they all go. That's where they spend the majority of their time, these kids from Parkland. Was talking about how the weapon is the one that we should be going after. It's not the person, it's not a mental illness, it's the weapon. The weapon? And they go on and on and on about this. So when I see we need to be secure, what that tells me is they want to feel a certain way. They want to feel secure. And the only way you feel secure is if you just take away what's making you feel unsecure or insecure. And for them, that would be the gun. But as we've seen, through statistics, through history, banning the gun does not work. They've tried it in Australia. They've tried it in Great Britain. They've tried it in multiple different countries and continents. And throughout different continents. And we've seen that violence, the homicide rate has gone up. Gun crime has gone up in many of these places because the criminals suddenly, coincidentally, still get their hands on these weapons. It's not the law abider who's at fault. It's the criminal. It's the law breaker. So, how do you have secure places and people? How do you have security? Back to my original question. Are they opposite of each other, or can they coexist? If you look at places that do not have severe gun control laws, places like Texas, my home state of Missouri, many places in the South, you see that there are there is low crime there in relation to gun homicides. But if you look at places like Chicago, California, New York, it's the opposite. To have real security means you have to have freedom. You cannot be secure if you are not free. Because to take away the freedom of self-defense, and they will say, well, that's not what we're doing. That's exactly what they are doing. That's what they're calling for. Word for word. Step by step. That's what they want. To take that away is to take away security. We have to be very careful what we wish for, and we have to be vigilant. What's given me hope is there are a number of people, a lot of people who are pushing back against this narrative that the gun is the problem. And that gives me hope. That's good to see, but we have to keep it up. We cannot allow them to control the argument, to control the debate, to control the terms. We have to be engaged. And we have to do so with logic, with facts, with reason, firmly planted in her seat. That is how we win. I'll take a break and come back on the Blake Johnson program. Don't go anywhere, everyone. We will be right back in just a second. Continuing on, I have some good news to share with you. Something positive that I think you will enjoy. I went to see the I Can Only Imagine movie over the weekend. I told you last week I was going to try to do that, and I did. I didn't go see Ready Player One. Meant to, just didn't have enough time, and it's just the way it worked out. But I did go see I Can Only Imagine, and I have to tell you, it is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. One of the most powerful, emotional, real movies I've seen in a long time. And it's such a breath of fresh air. I really like Christian movies. I like the Fireproof movie, the Courageous, War Room, Facing the Giants, God's Not Dead. I like those, but that's more of a preaching to the choir type of movie, which I am fine with. But this movie is different. It not only gives the message that Jesus is the answer, but it does it in such a way that I think reaches out to so many people, because the song has reached so many different people. When that song came out, it was not only a game changer for the Christian music industry, not only a career maker for the band Mercy Me, that's the band that wrote the song, that released the song, but it crushed all different charts. It crossed different genres on the radio, played on different top 40 stations, secular stations. I mean, it was very highly requested by, the listeners of different radio formats and so forth. The album that it came out on, it's gone to triple platinum, which is, I think that's like 3 million buys. If you get gold, it's like a 500,000. Platinum is 1 million, and triple platinum obviously would be 3 million. So, I mean, I believe it's the most bought Christian song, Christian album in the history of Christian music, which is amazing. And it tells the story of Bart Millard, the lead singer of Mercy Me, and his life growing up in an abusive home with an abusive dad, who went from being this monster. The father, by the way, was played by Dennis Quaid. Brilliant actor. Oh my gosh. he just blew me away. Every scene that he was in, I was either just terrified of his character because he really played his father, Bart's father, to a T, and he says that in interviews. He says Dennis Quaid, he knocked it out of the park. I was either doing that or I was crying. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. It is a tearjerker movie. It's so powerful. But it tells the story of redemption and how anybody can be saved. And that's the important thing. No matter how far you may have fallen, no matter how dark things seem, there is still a path to redemption. And you see that in this movie. You also see the flaws in the main character, his growing up, his maturity or lack thereof, and him having to find that maturity. I mean, it's a very real movie. It's something that you can watch and think, wow, this feels like it's either telling my story or it's telling a story that I'm very familiar with, something that I can relate to. It's made a ton of money. In fact, the theater I went to go see it at was in Lebanon, and that's where the lead actor who plays Bart, that's where he grew up, was Lebanon, Missouri. So I went and saw it at that particular theater. He goes to a church up there in Lebanon. And there were a lot of people that went to see it, got to talk with one of the guys who goes, I think he goes to the church, but he does know that Finley, I believe that's his last name, but he knows him, and he says, yeah, they're very stand-up people, respectable people. So it was good. I would highly recommend it. Highly recommend you go see that film, and bring a box of Kleenexes, because you will need them. So, but it gave me a lot of hope. Something that I think we could all use in our very chaotic society that we live in. Alright, more to come. Stay right there. Back in just a second.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Harder time thinking I'm really going to make it in the radio industry because I don't seem to know how to make and keep friends. Oh man, it's rough. It is rough. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I think there is a lesson to learn here. Something that I can learn more of, make sure I keep myself in check on, but also just let you know more about. First of all, just kind of a side note. I really enjoyed yesterday, Resurrection Sunday. And I don't know about you, but it seems like every year it just feels like we are drifting further and further away from treasuring what that day is really all about. But not just that day. Good Friday, then that Saturday, and then that Sunday. We forget what it really means. We know what it is supposed to mean. But it's so easy to focus on ourselves that we lose sight of what we should focus on. And you see that in holidays like Christmas as well. And, you know, my pastor talked about how we have to be a people that speak life into this world. And what he meant by that was, doing what I do every week. I talk to you about the news of the day. I try to give you some perspective on what is going on in our world. But I've been trying to, in the weeks and months, just ever since this new year started, basically, I've tried to focus on things that really matter, things that you can affect, the things that I think you really should know about. And then try to have some fun on the side, too. But so much of our media focus on death, on destruction, on chaos, on hatred, on all the bad things of our society. We don't regularly talk about the good. We're hateful people towards each other. We are always thinking that someone has an agenda when really they just have a question. And I'm guilty of that. I've done it. Absolutely. And it's caused me to do some self-reflection. I've been trying to spend less and less time on social media. It's hard because it's hard to do my job if I'm not on social media. I'm trying to figure out a way to do that because I don't want to be on social media. I'm so tired of it. It depresses me. So I'm trying to stay away from it as much as I can. But it can get hard. It can get tempting. So, with that being said, I saw a tweet over the weekend that just made me sad. It really did. Because this doesn't help. This does not help anything. It doesn't unite us. It doesn't cause us to be more kind and compassionate. It doesn't drive us to prayer, to humility, any of that. There's not a single ounce of godliness in this tweet at all. And maybe I'm just overreacting, I don't know, but it just bothered me, so I wanted to bring it to your attention. So Mark Hamill, for those of you who don't know, Mark Hamill plays Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. He played Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. And he also played the Joker, I think mostly in the animated shows, played the Joker. And he played on The Flash. I can't remember the name of the character, but he played on that show. He was a villain on that show too. But he's got a massive following. Millions upon millions of people follow him, read what he says, interact with him. He's very active on social media, very active on Twitter with his fans. Well, he puts out this tweet in response to some Republican person. Let me see if I can find it here. I want to get this right. But he says something that I just think is going to just further divide us. This person, Ronna McDaniel, GOP chairwoman, she tweets first, "Democrats hate our president more than they love our country." Now, is that true? Well, for me personally, I think there are Democrats who, at least on the surface, when you just look at what they say, they are much more critical of the president than they are talking about how much they love our country. I rarely see Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, people like that. I rarely see them talk about our founders in the positive light. I rarely see them, if ever, say anything good about our Constitution except when it benefits them. Democrat supporters, liberals, are constantly trashing this president day in and day out. And look, I'm not the hugest fan of Donald Trump, you know that, but I want him to succeed. I don't hate the man. I have nothing personal against him, because I don't know him personally. I don't know what's in the man's heart day after day after day. So she tweets this out, and then Mark Hamill shares it He says, I hate our president because I love our country. 340,000 likes. Almost 67,000 retweets. And I was looking through some of the comments, and this further proves my point. People saying he's a traitor, he's evil, he's not my president, he's a pig, he's an idiot. You see what I'm saying? Mark Hamill is adding to this divide. He's not helping anything. You don't have to like any of the president's policies. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. But to say you hate the man, hate. I found that two words that we use so often, but don't really think about what it means, are the words hate and love. It's odd. It's fascinating. We use the word love all the time. I love this food. I love this show. I love this game. I love this book. I love this celebrity. Whatever it is. And we use the word hate all the time. But to use the word hate about an individual, what good does that do? What does that do to help anything? It doesn't. So then, I know I'm kind of taking a while to explain this, but I'm just trying to really focus on this topic because I think it's important. So Stephen Kent, I interviewed him a month and a half ago. He's the host of Beltway Bantha's Star Wars podcast. They talk a lot about politics and Star Wars and so on and so forth. So his page, Beltway Bantha's, liked that tweet. So I see that and I'm thinking, that's odd. Why would you like that tweet? Because for me, if you like a tweet, that means you like a tweet. You approve. You like what somebody said. I mean, maybe I forgot the definition of like, but that's typically what that means. So on their show, they claim to be for respectful debate. They claim to be for, civil disagreement. They say we don't want to be people who are being hateful and nasty and vitriolic towards one another. But then several episodes they would talk about how Trump is such a douche, he's a pig, he's an idiot. It'd be a guest that would say something like that, and they would laugh, and they wouldn't say anything about it, and one of them would agree with them, and it was hypocrisy. It was inconsistency all around. Look, if that's your shtick, that's fine. But don't claim to be against that when you're doing it on your show. So I called them out on it. I said, that's pretty shameful for you to like something like that. Is our enemy flesh and blood? Because one of them claims to be a Christian. So is our enemy flesh and blood? Is this really going to help things? So I get a response back from Stephen Kent. And let me read to you some of what he said. This is his first tweet to me. He says, Dear Blake, over here at BB, we are just Hamill fanboys. We like tweets sometimes from him without much accounting for branding. A retweet is more of an endorsement. Respectfully, simmer down. Simmer down. Okay. So then I responded to that and said, it's a pretty tasteless statement, you have to admit. If you really believe there's nothing morally wrong with a celebrity using his platform to hate another human being, then that tells me a lot about your standards, to be honest. And then he says, you know what? We commit every week to talking about this stuff. When Hamill tweets are on the agenda for Thursday's episodes, we're talking about them. If the best you've got is you like a crude tweet, then whatever, man. That doesn't define what we do here. And he goes on, and he goes on, and he goes on. And I said, he starts accusing me of, not wanting to listen to their show or having issues with their show and unfollowing them, and it all being based on that one tweet. And I said, no, it's not just based on that tweet. It's based on things you've said on your show, based on things that have been said on your show that you haven't pushed back on at all, that you've either laughed at, approved of, or said yourself. So, we go on about this, and at one point he says, well, tell me which episodes we did that on, and I will go and listen to it. So I did. I said, here's the episodes. These are the ones that you did that on. And he says, let's see, one. Well, I can't find it for some reason. Let's see, there's a couple different responses. Let's see. Oh, here it is. No, I have a life too, and I'm not going to listen to 180 minutes of my own voice. If you want to time mark complaints, I'll happily review. Sorry you're not getting what you're looking for out of the show, but I was a Republican before Trump was, and he doesn't define me. So, hold on. So you asked me to give you evidence. Let you know, where did we say this? What episodes did we say this? I give that to you, and you don't want to listen to it. Because it's just so hard to click on an episode and skim through it and find where that was said. That's really hard. Oh, I know. So he wants me to go and just take little clips and send it to him. That's not my job, and that's not what you asked me to do. So it's just a complete and clear cop-out. That's what it is. And the reason I bring this to you is the platforms that we have. Everybody has a platform these days on social media. Going back to the sermon that I spoke about earlier. Speak life. Use it to speak life. If you are using your social media platform to speak hatred and vitriol and nastiness, that, for one thing, is wrong, but secondly, it is leading people astray. Especially if you have a lot of followers who look up to you. Another example is in your everyday life. If you have a lot of friends and you are constantly just bashing and being nasty, but then on the other side saying we shouldn't be doing that, what do you think that's doing? What kind of effect do you think you're having on the rest of society? I have severe disagreements with President Obama. Severe disagreements with these Parkland High School kids. I think their ideas are dumb, are terrible, but I don't hate the kids. I don't think the kids are stupid in and of themselves, like they are incapable of having a clear thought. But I think their ideas are terrible ideas. This isn't that. It is, I hate our president. I hate this person. That's not good, guys. That's really not good. So, I don't know where you stand on that, but I just thought it was interesting. So, essentially, what I'm trying to say is I don't think I'm going to be interviewing Stephen Kent anytime in the near future. That's basically where we are now. This is pretty fascinating. I wanted to bring this to your attention real quick, and then we'll go to break. But since we were kind of talking about the Parkland shooting, I found this so interesting. So, all throughout, leading up to this event, people were talking about how amazing it is that these kids were just somehow able to, establish and create this event and get so many people to come and raise so much money for this March for Our Lives rally. Well, if you follow the money, if you do your research, it's pretty clear to see that this is not a grassroots movement. It wasn't. You had people like George Soros, a ton of liberal progressive organizations and politicians raising money, bringing in people to this event. This was not something that was raised by the kids. This was not something that was created by the kids. They were used as pawns in their political game. Well, props to the Washington Post for doing their research. We are now finding out that most of the people who attended the march were not young people. They were middle-aged people. Middle-aged, liberal, progressive women, to be more specific. They do some research here from American Research, and they sampled every fifth person at designated increments within the staging area and were able to gather a field approximation of a random sample. So far, the data set includes surveys collected from 1,745 protest participants. The sample of 256 people who were selected randomly, it gave them a chance to provide evidence about who attended the march and why. And it says, whereas the 2017's Women's March was 85% women, the March for Our Lives was 70% women. Further, participants were highly educated. 72% had a BA or higher. Contrary to what was reported by the media, the DC March was not primarily made up of teenagers. Only 10% of the participants were under 18. 10%. The average age of the adults in the crowd was just under 49 years old, which is older than participants of the other marches surveyed, but similar to the age of the average participant at the Million Moms March in 2000, which was also about gun control. About 27% of the participants had never protested before. Only about a third of them had contacted an elected official in the past year, while about 3/4 of the more seasoned protesters had. Even more interesting, the new protesters were less motivated about the issue of gun controls. Now, you think, the March for Our Lives rally, what's it about? It's about gun control. Well, this here says many of these protesters weren't even there to protest gun control. Only 12%, in fact, who were new to protesting reported that they were motivated to join the march because of the gun control issue, compared with 60% of the participants with experience in protesting. Instead, new protesters reported being motivated by the issues of peace, 56%, and Trump at 42%. And it reports to be a very liberal crowd. About 16% identified as ideologically moderate, higher than at any other protest, but unsurprisingly, it was still very liberal. 79% identified as left-leaning, and 89% reported voting for Hillary Clinton. So what does that tell us about this march? It tells us all we need to know. It tells us that this was propaganda through and through. And it was set up by the left, and it was promoted by the media to make it look like we are coming for your guns, when that's what many of them want to do. But if you look deeper into it, you realize, oh my gosh, this is really not a grassroots movement whatsoever. Fascinating. Just simply fascinating. All right, we'll be right back. So have you guys seen the Roseanne reboot, Roseanne show, whatever they're doing? That happened. Oh, I don't even know when that show airs. I don't watch it. But apparently, it's done very well. And on the surface, it looks like a good thing, right? Well, not if you know what Roseanne is really all about. Roseanne, what's her name? Roseanne Barr. Is that her full name? She is a known actress. I believe she's a comedian. I don't know for sure, but I think. But she's obviously well known for her role in that TV show. And she's also known for her political commentary, her activism, and when the show was, when it first started, back in its heyday, it promoted things like gay marriage, abortion. In fact, she tried to get, I don't know if she tried to get one of her daughters to have an abortion, but she thought about aborting her own child in the show. Now all of a sudden, she is this celebrity on the right because she said that she voted for Trump in the 2016 election. And the reason she voted for Trump was because she believed it was time for change. She didn't like Hillary Clinton, and she thought that Trump could make the economy better. So that's why she voted for him. Okay, well, nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. This is a free country. I don't have a problem with that. But now, conservatives are now claiming that Roseanne is just like them. They're latching onto her and saying this woman identifies with our values. The show itself did extraordinarily well, and it pulled like over 18 million for its season premiere, which is really, really good, particularly for today's world, when you can just, watch TV online, to watch a show live on network television and to pull those numbers is no small feat whatsoever. But Christians, conservatives need to be careful when latching on to somebody like that and saying that this person represents you. No, she does not represent you. Roseanne Barr is a socialist. She is a hardcore liberal progressive. And I find it just mind-numbing that people... First of all, I'm not particularly surprised that she voted for Trump because Trump is not a conservative either. Okay? I don't believe he's ever been a conservative. He became a conservative when he thought he could win. That's when he became a conservative. But he's not an ideological conservative by any measure. He has people around him who are, but I don't think he is ideologically conservative. I have not seen that. He's been a liberal New York Democrat for most of his life. Well, Roseanne has been a socialist for most of her life. So I can see that. I can see why she would vote for him. And on the show, they portray Trump voters as voting for Trump because of economic issues, not for culture issues, not for morality issues. Now, unfortunately, I think much of that is at its heart true, obviously, because people would make fun of Ted Cruz and say, well, we're not electing a pastor, and they would excuse all of Trump's, moral flaws. That's very much an understatement to call it a flaw, but so I can see that. But there are those who just are just so blindsided by it. They just want somebody to speak for them. But we've got to be careful with who we look for and who we look towards for support. You shouldn't be depending on somebody else to say and believe the things that you do. You believe those yourself, and you live those out every day. That's what you're supposed to do. It shouldn't be about a person. It should be about a principle that you believe in and you follow. But anyway, I thought that was important to talk about because, again, this is something that you have control over. You can choose whether or not to watch the show, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't watch it. I'm sure there's funny parts to it. I'm just saying, don't get too excited, okay? Just be careful and understand who you're actually listening to and understand that person. All right, I want to close out the show talking about this. This story has just got me fired up. Laura Ingraham and the boycott against her for a comment that I honestly don't understand why people think is offensive. I really don't. So, in case you're not familiar with the story, David Hogg has been complaining about not being accepted into these liberal colleges. He's sent in his transcript, his GPA, all that stuff, and they haven't accepted him yet. Now, if you look at the facts of this, he applied before he became famous. So, it's not like they're denying him because of who he is today, because of his fame, although I'm not saying that there is no evidence of that whatsoever, but in large part that's the case. So he's complaining about this, and Laura Ingraham tweets out, look, this happens to everybody, okay? People get rejected all the time. Stop your whining, grow up, and, start acting the way you're supposed to be acting. Be an adult, be mature. So then he starts by listing the advertisers that advertise for Laura Ingraham's TV show on Fox News. And I believe at least 10 of them have pulled out. So then Laura Ingraham announces that she's going to be on a week-long vacation, which usually in these cases is the beginning of the end of your career. Now, this is the latest that I found. More than a dozen companies have bailed, but now conservatives and fans of Ingraham are fighting back, and here's what's going on. The companies boycotting Ingraham are mostly major household names, including Office Depot, Gerber, Hulu, Honda, Johnson & Johnson, among others. As of Sunday afternoon, the list has swelled to 17 companies, so that's where we are today. It's not clear exactly why the companies chose to remove their advertising from the show, other than the fact that far-left groups were applying pressure. Well, of course that's why they were doing it. But it may not end well for those who cave. That's because conservatives and loyal Fox News viewers are using the power of the dollar to fight back. In response to the boycott, hundreds, possibly thousands of people have vowed to disassociate themselves and their hard-earned money from companies that have caved to the liberal mob. People using the hashtag #IStandWithLaura posted their commitments to social media, while others encouraged the counter-boycott. And that lists all these people saying that they will no longer buy or do business with those companies that have bailed on the Laura Ingraham show. Because of the advertiser exodus, Ingraham's ratings went down during the second half of last week, and on Friday, Ingraham announced again that she would be going on a week-long vacation. Fox News told The Blaze that the break was in no way connected to the advertiser boycott, and Ingraham would return to the airwaves after her vacation. Still, I saw a story, I don't know if it was from Business Insider or Reuters, I can't remember which one, but that site reported that a Fox News, I don't know if it was an executive, but it was somebody up in the food chain, said that if Laura Ingraham isn't able to find a way, because she apologized for those comments, which I don't think she should have done, but that's what she did. She apologized for them, but that wasn't good enough for David Hogg. He's calling for her to, stand down, is what he said. He wants her to be fired. That's what he wants. He wants her to resign or get fired. That's what he wants. It's a bully tactic. And so you have this going on. And, but anyway, the Fox executive said if Laura isn't able to find a way to bring those companies back, then that could be fatal. I don't know what's going to happen to her show, but to me, this just shows yet again how much we are turning into a mobocracy. If you don't like what somebody says, then you just have to shut them down, and you have to target them. And David Hogg is now going after the advertisers and posting their addresses online, too, which is, that could be criminal, could possibly be criminal. So, I don't know, see where that goes, but hopefully we'll have an update for you next week. In the meantime, hope you've enjoyed the show, and I hope you are able to find some rest and relaxation after today and throughout the rest of the week. Take care, everyone. God bless. We will see you here next time.